Hello and welcome to the Bald Man Cave. If you've stumbled across this channel, it's probably because you started losing your hair and you started panicking about it. And you got online looking for answers, looking for support. That's exactly why I started this channel. I wanted to create content and videos that I wish I had had when I first started losing my hair at around age 21, 22. And in this video, to kick things off, I thought it might make sense just to share with you my hair loss journey, the things I struggled with, and how I finally came to the point of acceptance where I was able to shave my head and just move on with my life, which ended up being the best decision I ever made. So things kind of started off for me really shortly after college. During college, I had long, shaggy hair. I kind of got used to that look. And so when I started moving on into the real world and got my first real job, I realized that I needed to cut my hair a little bit shorter. And once I started cutting my hair shorter, I realized very quickly that my hair was thinning. Now, I was in denial about this for quite some time. I would put my hair in certain ways. I would try to brush it to the side. I would try to do a little bit of a comb over thing, and I would do this in the mirror where I could convince myself that my hair loss really wasn't that bad. So I was in a denial phase for a couple of years before I started getting to the point where it was just happening so rapidly. I was losing my hair at such a rapid rate that I could no longer be in denial about it. That's when I started taking things like Rogaine. I got special combs and brushes that were supposed to stimulate hair growth. I tried all kinds of different things and never really experienced any new hair growth. So at this point, I started to really panic about my hair loss. I then moved to a new city where I didn't know anybody and I had virtually no support group nearby where I could kind of share these concerns and share these worries. On top of that, even if I did have somebody nearby, I never really felt comfortable sharing that I was so embarrassed and I was so panicked about my hair loss. It was kind of embarrassing to me. On a surface level, I knew it was very superficial to be worried about hair loss, but it was really bothering me on a deep level. It got to the point where I was almost all consumed by my hair loss. I was thinking about it constantly throughout the day. It would get so bad that I would be driving down the street or down the highway and I would be looking in the rearview mirror just to check my hair for no real purpose. There was nobody with me, but I was just thinking about it so much that I just started doing that type of thing. I would go to the bathroom at work to check my hair in the mirror, even though I was just sitting in a cubicle and no one was really looking at me. I just had this constant need to check on my hair. And of course, during this whole process, my hair continued to fall out, continued to get thinner, and I continued to get more and more panicked. I was single at the time and I was really worried about my dating prospects as my hair got thinner. And so I got a little bit desperate and I started doing research on hair transplants. And I ended up getting a consultation to get a hair transplant. The going to Turkey to get a hair transplant wasn't really a thing at this time. So I found a surgeon in my local city at the time who did hair transplants. So I did a consultation with them, ended up going through with the hair transplant. I did the FUT procedure, which is the strip method, as it's sometimes called, where they literally take a strip of skin from the back of your head and use those hair follicles to move them to the front where you need them. Now, a lot of people today use the FUE procedure, which is a lot more common. That's where they take individual hair follicles from the back of your head to move them to the front. The reason I did the FUT procedure was there was two reasons for it. One is they could get a lot more hair in one sitting. And my hair loss was so severe at that point that I felt I really needed a lot of hair. The other reason was FUT was a little bit more common then. They were kind of 50-50 on which one they would recommend, FUT versus FUE. Again, me thinking I was going to keep my hair forever and I wasn't worried about having a scar on the back of my head, I ended up going through with the FUT procedure. Now, if you're somebody who's thinking about getting a hair transplant today, I would recommend FUE, even though you get less hair in one sitting, just so you do have the option to shave your head down the road if you ever decide to do that. So I got the hair transplant, and almost immediately I regretted it for a couple of reasons. One is I didn't tell anybody that I had gotten the hair transplant. I wanted it to be a secret, but right off the bat, it was very obvious that I had gotten one. There's a lot of swelling in the beginning, there's scabbing, and it was pretty noticeable that there was new hair growing in uh, the front of my head. So the whole idea of keeping it a secret did not really work. It was pretty obvious to people that I had done something, and so the secret was kind of out pretty quickly. So the other reason I regretted it is because I was still panicked about my hair. I was still worried about how my hair looked, even though I had started to regrow hair in the front. So it was nice to have that hair back, but I was still constantly stressed about if people could tell that I got a hair transplant. I was still losing some hair in the back of my head, so I was panicked about that as well. And so for the next few years after getting this hair transplant, I was still living in constant anxiety about my hair. So it hadn't even resolved the problem that I was looking to resolve, which was really just to get rid of the anxiety that I'd been feeling for years and years and years about my hair. So it finally got to the point where it was so bad, I could no longer take it anymore. I had started going into a hat phase where I was wearing hats anytime I left the house, where I just started realizing how ridiculous it was. I had spent all this money to get a hair transplant, and I was covering it up with a hat whenever I had the opportunity. So I finally said, you know what? I'm done with it. I'm going to take the leap. I'm going to bite the bullet and shave my head. And I wish I had done it from the very beginning, because the amount of relief, almost immediate relief that I felt, where I no longer felt like I was trying to cover things up, where I no longer felt like I was anxious. The moment my hair was gone, all of that anxiety just went away with it. And it was an amazingly cathartic experience. And I just felt so much relief in that moment. Now, it took me, I won't lie, it took me a couple of weeks to get used to my new look. And of course, anytime I saw somebody who I hadn't seen in a little while, they would make a comment about me shaving my head. But in all honesty, most of the comments were positive. Most people said that they liked it, they thought it looked good. And so all the nervousness I had about meeting somebody or seeing somebody I hadn't seen in a little while, all of that anxiety went away too. So it got to the point pretty quickly where people got used to seeing me with a bald head. And to be honest, it took people less time to get used to my look than it took me, because when you think about it, other people see you more than you see you. So other people got used to my look very quickly. And then after a couple months, I was totally used to it as well. So if you're somewhere in this hair loss journey, I know better than most how difficult it can be. I know how much anxiety it can put on you, especially if you're young. If you're in your late teens, early 20s, and you start losing your hair, it can sometimes feel like your world is just over. Like everything's just done for you. And it can be really, really hard to see how things can get better. And again, even though you might rationalize in your head that it's just hair, it shouldn't be that big of a deal, these are the types of thoughts that I had, and I know a lot of other guys have as well. It's really easy to go down a dark path when you're dealing with hair loss. It just feels so out of your control, and that feels really unfair. However, I'm here to tell you that it absolutely is not over. Your life is not over by any means. I can tell you with full confidence that I am 100% happier now with a shaved head than I ever was with hair. Getting rid of all that anxiety, all the stress, the constant worrying about my hair, all that being gone is absolutely incredible. If I could bottle up that feeling and give it to you, I bet lots of people listening to this would shave their head as well. With that being said, a couple of really important things to do if you're struggling with hair loss is you really need to talk about how you're feeling. And I know that can be hard for guys, especially. We're not used to sharing our feelings, but this was a huge mistake that I made early on, was that I bottled everything up. I just didn't talk about what I was struggling with. So if you're in this situation, I encourage you to reach out to somebody you trust. Maybe it's a friend, a brother, your dad, somebody, um, and just let them know that you're going through this right now and you're really struggling with it. Now, of course, they're not going to have the solutions for you, But sunlight is the best disinfectant, meaning when you get things out in the open, they're less scary and they're easier to deal with. Because once you've exposed your fears, it helps you recognize that they're not as bad as you think they are. It's only when you keep that stuff inside that you spiral and spiral and end up going down some really dark rabbit holes. So, getting things off your chest is a really important step. And then you can start moving on to things that you can control in your life. Now, of course, there's different medications and maybe you are considering a hair transplant. Those are things you can do for your hair loss. But in the meantime, there's lots of other things you can do to focus on for improving yourself, whether it's fitness or career or personal finance or any number of other things that you can be focused on right now to help keep yourself from going into those spirals. Get your mind focused on other things that are frankly more important than your hair. I would also encourage you to take a look around outside. Sometimes we spend too much time online where we read about things that only fit into the narrative that we're trying to tell ourselves already. So if we're trying to tell ourselves that losing your hair means it's just the end of the world and your life is over, and you're constantly finding content online that's telling you that, you're reading comments that reinforce that belief, that's not productive at all. So sometimes it makes sense to just shut everything down, get outside, and start taking a look at the real world around you. You'll recognize that you see bald guys everywhere who are in happy relationships, living happy lives. I'm one of them. Once I shaved my head, my life got drastically better. And I know that's the case for many, many other guys that I've talked to as well. So sometimes just shutting down from all the noise online, all the narratives that are just perpetually telling us the things that, in this case, we don't want to hear, but that our algorithms just continue to feed us, that's not helping your mental state. So, with that said, I hope it was helpful to hear my story. Feel free to comment below your story as well. Is this something you're struggling with? Are you taking steps to stop or prevent your hair loss, or are you ready to just accept it and take the leap and shave your head as well? I'd really love to hear from you, and I would appreciate if you could subscribe and like the video, and I will see you on the next one.